buongiorno a tutti. Anche noi vorremmo esprimere la nostra grande gratitudine per poter parlare e discutere qui, allora grazie infinite e scusateci, we will talk in English, but we are sure that you can all follow that. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, the central baths in Pompei were still under construction. This is an interesting feature already, but the building's incomplete state may provide us also with a prism, a tool, to look at the exact moment of the eruption and the hours that followed. Our aim today is to bring in a new perspective on the debate on the date of the 79 CE eruption, focusing on the building activities that were going on in the baths at the time of this huge natural disaster. We propose here today a timeline of the Central Baths building projects in relation to seasonal work in the world of Roman construction. We seek to combine archaeological evidence from the baths with snippets of information from other source material, written sources that reveal ancient know-how and building practices. Admittedly, these snippets are few and somewhat dispersed across time and region. Still, the idea to have a closer look at building activities going on in Pompei in 79 and to relate these activities to the moment of the eruption is new and worth a try. In any case, it is an approach that has remained untested so far, and we look forward to discussing our ideas with you afterwards. The line of argumentation unfolds in 5 parts. First, we will briefly present and discuss the status of the building project in 79 CE and outline some of the main principles and hypotheses, all based on the analysis of the baths published in our recent monograph. Second, we will discuss the sequence of the building activities and establish what remained to be done when Mount Vesuvius erupted and put an end to all activities in Pompei, including the building of the central baths. Third, we will discuss some written sources that shed light on building practices and that seem to reflect Roman ideas about seasonal building activities. Fourth, we will identify some possible clues and detail how this archaeological evidence from the central baths might help to narrow down a bit the period in which the eruption took place, a time span now ranging from August to well into November. Fifth and finally, we propose a timeline for the building of the central baths and connect this timeline to possible dates for the eruption, concluding with a suggestion for the period that seems to us the most plausible one. First, however, and as a conclusion of this brief introduction, it is important to underline the fact that the second half of the 1st century CE was crucial for the further development of Roman baths and bathing culture. A real boom in bath building started in the late Neronian Flavian period, not only around the Bay of Naples, but in the Roman world at large. This building boom in baths can be explained by a series of innovations, such as the invention of window glass, tumuli for wall heating, and heated vaults. Going to the baths on a regular basis became part of the Roman way of life. Moreover, in the late 1st century, the possibilities of concrete, opus caementicium, were fully explored and employed on a wider scale. And baths played a pioneering role here, first on a smaller scale in private baths, followed by large-scale public buildings. When Mount Vesuvius erupted, work in the baths was still in full swing. Had the baths been completed and put into use, they would have represented the state-of-the-art in Roman bath buildings. Because of this, we have reasons to believe that the baths were designed by an expert architect, who may have been the contractor for building the bathing block as well. This was not uncommon for large and prestigious building projects, as Vitruvius reminds us when talking about his own involvement in both the design and the construction of a basilica in Fanum Fortunae. In any case, the skills and experience that were needed to design and build these state-of-the-art bathing rooms, notably the heated rooms, allow for the assumption that a construction company specializing in the building of baths was hired to perform this part of the project. Other work in and around Insula 4, such as the building and finishing of the tabernae, the portico surrounding the balestra, and the interior decoration of the rooms, could be carried out by one or two local building companies. All evidence from the building points to rational and deliberate planning of construction activities and well-considered sequence of work that should prevent delays. Roman builders were well aware of the constraints and possibilities that various building materials represented. Reading Vitruvius' ideas on the different qualities of stone, sand, and wood in Book 2, for example, clearly shows the importance of picking the right materials for different kinds of building projects. We may assume that experienced builders hired for expensive prestige projects, such as the central baths, possess this kind of know-how. Moreover, passages in Vitruvius' work and recommendations by other writers, such as Faventinus and Palladius, reveal a high degree of rational planning. With a closer look at the central baths, it is possible to detect such rational and careful planning of the work in the building. Evidence points at a series of well-considered steps that allowed for an efficient and hence cost-reducing sequence of work during the phases of construction and finishing the building.
The sequence. At the time of the eruption, the rough construction of the bathing, can you hear me? Was completed. All standing walls of the apoditarium area, the frigidarium, I say it in Latin, not in English, no frigidarium, no? It's okay? Tepidarium and caldarium were finished. The barrel walls of the frigidarium, tepidarium, and caldarium, as well as the dome of the sudatorium, had been constructed as well. Nowadays, hardly anything is left of these walls. The excavators found the debris of the walls with a thick layer of lapilli on top of the collapsed walls, as was reported by both Giuseppe Fiorelli and August Mau in the late 1870s. The weight of the collapsing concrete walls damaged the hypocaust. Test trenches along the south and north wall of the tepidarium revealed that the hypocaust in this room had been completely installed, just as a tubuli for wall heating. It became also clear that the damaged wall and hypocaust in the tepidarium resulted from the eruption. Oh, I need more. Sorry. Because we found lapilli in the lowest strata of the excavation trenches, fragments of rectangular teculae mamate in the excavation trenches point at heated walls. A novelty dating to the late Neronian period. The excavators removed the debris of the walls in all 4 bathing rooms without noticing such details. Given the fact that all heating installations were completed in the tepidarium and supported by the archaeological evidence of the caldarium and the sudatorium, we may conclude that the construction company responsible for the bathing block was more or less done. Working from the back to the front, that is from the south to the north, all heated rooms were provided with hypocaust wall and walled heating. The two pools of the caldarium and the one of the frigidarium, all three in masonry and lined with opus igninum, were also completed. The trains of the pools were also placed to facilitate the work of plumbers who had to arrange the water supply to and within the bathing rooms. The discharge of the wastewater was partially finished on the east side of the tepidarium in the service area by a channel that would direct the wastewater to the back street, the Vicolo del Tesmo. The water that eventually would have drained into the sewage system of the public latrine was under construction in the palestra to the west of the bathing rooms. The summary of the evidence so far makes clear that the work carried out by the specialized workforce, the bath builders, had mostly been done. The following activities remain to be done. First of all, interior decoration of the room, probably with marble veneer for the floors, pools, and lower parts of the walls. The slabs of colored marble found in the palestra point to this type of decor and are another key for the intended grandeur and sense of luxury of the baths, if they had been completed. The shiny marble of floors and lower parts of the walls could have gained even more. Construction of the prominence in the sunlit rooms thanks to large glazed window openings. The glazing of the windows was scheduled in all probability for the very fast stage of the project, given the fragility and the cost of window glass, novelties that had been invented only shortly before. Most of the work had remained to be done was in and around the palestra. Building a portico planned for 3 sides had just begun. Several steel, unpolished travertine blocks had been put in place, serving as a plinth in the columns. The last of these blocks still shows the bosses that still had to be removed. The gutter that had to run alongside the plinth was somewhat further executed, rounding the northwestern corner of the palestra. The channel for the discharge of water in the southern part of the palestra was in its initial stage. We were able to retrace the foundation layer here in one of the trenches. The same trench reveals the function of the basin at the west side of the palestra, a reused impluvium from a former atrium house, probably out of the 2nd century before Christ. At the west side of the palestra, a reused impluvium. This impluvium was served with provision water supply for the building activities that were still going on, notably in the palestra itself. In the final stage of the building project, shortly before the delivery and opening of the bath, the basin would have been demolished and the southwest area of the palestra would have been leveled, that is, after the completion of the discharge channel towards the latrine. The final leveling was relatively easy. After all the construction of the outdoor swimming pool, Natatio, at the east side had just begun. The city has excavated and the first layer of lava cementitium was put in place. Both Fiorelli and Mau mention the heap of sand next to the cavity sand that was not removed away from the building side, but was meant to level the southwestern part, an area sloping down quite steeply because of the natural slope here. Trenches reveal the outer corners of the Natatio and furthermore showed the foundation layer. The walls in cementitium had not been built yet. The underground channel in concrete had eventually would have let the overflow water from the Natatio to the latrine had to be finished as well. In conclusion of this part of the analysis, the works that remain to be done could also be executed by local workmen, not specialized in the building of baths or the technical installations for heating that were part and parcel of building bathing establishments. Finally, most of the remaining work seems to have been less dependent on the time of the year and specific weather conditions such as frost and excessive rainfall.
The exception to this, however, was the water supply.